what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you are doing well. Today I have a new tutorial where we're going to mix a trap beat specifically from scratch. I've had a lot of requests to do this style, and it's a smooth instrumental, got some soulful R&B types of elements in it. Let's go ahead and play back the beat. I'm going to let you hear what we've got. This is just as is. Everything is at 0, and then we're going to dive in and really bring this thing to life. So there is the instrumental. There's not a ton to it. There's about 9 tracks, but we can get our hands dirty with each of these tracks and bring out the most of them. And Stefan has definitely provided enough to make this a really impactful and smooth beat. So let's go ahead and let's start with the drums. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute our instrumentation over here. So we've just got our drum tracks, and then we'll bring these down in just a second, but we're going to deal with the kick and the 808 first. I usually like to start there because those are going to be the loudest elements in the mix. So the first thing I'm noticing is that the kick and the 808, they clash a little bit. There's some frequencies there that are shared. And also the kick, we really just need the attack and the transient from that just to give the 808 a little bit of bite. But it has a little bit of a sub kind of tail on it. So that is fighting with the tail of the 808. So I just want a shorter transient. Now, a lot of times we would use something like an enveloper to really go in and fine tune the kick, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to replace it so that we can more easily mix it with the 808 bass. I'm gonna choose one of my handy kicks here. I just save all of my kick drums that I use from my tracks so that I can edit them and reuse them later. So let's just try this one. And I'm going to be rolling off some of the high end here because, again, we just want the transient and the attack of the kick here. And I'm going to adjust the envelope so that we have a very quick decay time. Let's just try maybe 200, 209-ish. Let's try that. So you can hear just the balance between that and the other kick. They just this one blends a little better with our 808 because we're just using the transient. Just a very quick sound just to give the 808 some bite. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's put a level meter on our master. I just want to have something here where we can monitor our loudness, and I generally use RMS. Just the easiest for me because I'm familiar with it. So we'll just do peak and RMS. Let's just see where we're at with our kick and our 808 right now. So our RMS is pretty low. We're at -16. To be competing with commercial records in terms of master levels, we want to be more towards -10 to -7 being the extreme high end. But let's just put it at, say, -9. Let's just say that's our target. Now, to get it to that point, we're going to need to make some adjustments. But for the sake of example here, and with a lot of instrumentals, what I do is I mix into a limiter. But in this case, I'm going to mix into the maximizer from Ozone 7. So we're going to load that up, and I'll show you what we're going to do here. Let's get rid of the equalizer. We just want this maximizer section. So I'm going to switch the IRC, which this is just the algorithm that's being used to limit. And this IRC4 is really good. It's transparent. And we're going to set the threshold to 0. And we're going to set the ceiling to just below 0. So really all we're trying to do here is just keep our master from clipping, because we're going to be pushing our levels pretty hot for the mix. I like to focus in the mix on getting my most of my volume, and then that way we don't have to rely on the master so much to get our sound. But this is just going to keep things in check. So I'm setting the maximizer here to just below 0. Let's turn on true peak limiting. This is a good feature that takes into account the digital to analog conversion. Don't worry too much about it, but it's a good thing to turn on if you want to be safe about not clipping. So then let's move this control here, the character of the limiter, to transparent. I don't want this to affect the sound. Again, we're just keeping things in check, and we're just going to park it. That's all we want to do. We want to leave that there, and this is just going to allow us to push the levels a little bit, and we don't have to worry about clipping our master bus. So now what I want to do with the 808 is I want to put a compressor on it, because we're going to sidechain the kick and the 808 just a little bit so that they're not interfering with one another. So I'm going to pull up the compressor here, and we're going to go up to the sidechain, and we're going to select our kick R. So that was the replaced kick. And you'll see that as that kick is coming through our compressor, it's just attenuating it just a touch. Now we can adjust the ratio to have a little bit more room. Now you'll notice that my attack is set to 0. My release is very quick. Now the auto is selected. Don't get confused about this, because auto does not mean it's automatically setting this. It is still taking into account where you put this. It's just kind of assisting you a little bit. But the release time is pretty quick as well. We're just giving it just enough time to punch through that 808. So I'm going to turn the 808 up a little bit here. Let's just turn it up to about 2 decibels. Next thing I want to do is add a little bit of distortion to the 808. This is just something that's going to help it be present on laptops, cell phones, things like that. So I'm going to open up this free plugin called Camel Crusher, and I have a preset here. I'm just going to pull that up for the sake of time, the 808. So I'm using the distortion section, just a touch of it, and then we're compressing it pretty heavily, and it's got this cool fat mode that's going to give it a nice saturation here. So let's hear what that sounds like. So I'm going to turn the mix on that down. So that sounds pretty good. Let's go ahead and move on to our snap. Let's bring that up. And I think that only happens in the hooks. Let's go over there. Yeah. So let's hear that in the context. So I want to add some atmosphere to this snap here. So I'm just going to put a reverb on it. We're going to use the Valhalla. And let's just pull up a different mode here. Let's try a random space. This is a cool algorithm for drums. I'm just EQing it a little bit and turning the mix and the decay time down some. So that sounds pretty cool with that piano. We're going to deal with the piano here in a little bit, but that snap, I just wanted to give it kind of an air cool feel to it. So let's bring in our wood block. I'm going to add a reverb to that as well, just to give it a little bit of character. Let's just leave it on the concert hall. Sounds pretty cool. Let's add a delay to that as well. I think it'll be a nice touch to put a little bit of a tape delay on here. So let's go into Logic, delay, tape delay. We'll do a little quarter note delay. Turn the dry and the wet. That just kind of aids in the bounce a little bit. I spread it out some, and we're keeping it really subtle. I don't want that to be a distracting kind of delay. So let's bring in our clap here. So the clap needs a little bit of grit and impact. It's just a little... It's kind of still sitting sort of in the background a little bit. So I'm going to use a limiter. I'm going to pull up the L1 here. And I'm going to pull the out ceiling down to about 1.5 dB, somewhere in there, just to keep us from going too hot. And then I'm going to pull the threshold down. So without... Gives it a nice bite. I like that. That sounds good. And I want to do a reverb on this as well. So I'm just using our trusty Valhalla. I use this on probably 80 to 90% of my reverb needs. It's a really versatile sound. So the important thing with the reverb is just making sure that you keep your decay in check and your mix in check. We don't want to turn this thing into a big ocean of reverb and have it be super washy. It just really is about adding some texture, some space, and just giving the drums a little bit more of a depth and vibe. We don't want to overdo it though. All right, let's bring in our hi-hat. So a tendency a lot of times these days is to bring that hi-hat up way too loud. You know, the trap stuff is making the hi-hats more present, which is cool, having the really kind of drum core type of hi-hats, but we don't want them to dominate the kick and the snare. The kick and the snare really should still drive the drums. So there's a fine balance there, and this feels pretty good right now level-wise. So cool thing that we can do on trap types of hi-hats is just use a stock plugin in Logic. It's called the tremolo. So I'm just going to go pull up tremolo. We're going to adjust this a little bit. I'm going to turn the depth down. It actually sounds good at a quarter note rate. What it's doing is it's just dancing around the stereo field a little bit and just keeping that hi-hat interesting. Let's add a reverb to that as well, just to give it a little space. I like to add subtle reverbs to the hi-hats. Again, nothing super overpowering, but we want to give it a little space. So let's just pull up the Platinum Verb stock reverb in Logic. We'll turn the reverb time down a little bit. And I'm going to EQ the highs just a bit. That should be fine. Just something subtle. And let's check where we are level-wise. Still got a long way to go RMS, but this is fine for right now. Let's jump into our instrumentation now. This is the fun stuff. So let's listen to this piano. This is a cool little piano line that Stefan has put together. It almost sounds like a sample. So when I was listening to it in the mix, I wanted to approach it like that. I want it to sound kind of retro and have the, or give the perception that it may actually be a sample from vinyl. So let's pull up our EQ here, our channel EQ, and I want to just take a look at what's going on in the frequency spectrum here. So you'll notice there's a lot of things happening below 100, which is where our kick and our 808 are lying, and I don't want that to clash with those elements. We want those to occupy that space. We don't need that in our piano. So I'm just going to hit our low cut here, and we'll probably do a pretty heavy cut. We don't want to take off all the low end because then the piano is just going to sound kind of weak. And that should be pretty good. The other thing I'm noticing, and this happens a lot with pianos, is you have some frequency buildup from 200 to 500. This can be a problematic area where you get that kind of harsh, boxy sort of sound, resonant frequencies that can be really unpleasant on the ears. So we're going to tame that here in just a second. Let's pull up a plugin to do that. And I'm thinking we'll use a multiband compressor. It's a great tool to use for this kind of thing because we have fine control over our frequency bands. And we're going to bypass everything except for one band, which is where we're going to focus this thing. And we're going to be in this 200 to about 1.5K range, somewhere in there. I'm going to bring the threshold up. Let's just solo that. So you can hear there's some harsh boxy frequencies. So let's just bring our threshold down here. I'm going to turn the attack time down and our release up a little. So let's hear that now. So that's with, this is without. So it's just smoothing out those harsh frequencies. Now I'm going to pull up a plugin called Vinyl. It's from Isotope. And this is what I'm going to use to give us kind of that retro sample feel. Specifically, we're going to add a little bit of this dust control. And then we're going to use some of these other settings. So let's start with that. So that gives us a little bit of that vinyl dust sort of effect. Now we're going to use the warp. Now this is a really cool sort of tape delay, tape warp sort of effect, real retro sounding. And we're going to turn that depth up a little bit. And I'm going to use, we'll stick with this warp model. You can hear just a little bit of a pitch wavering there, just to give it that feel. Now let's see, let's turn the year to, let's try like 1970. That sounds pretty cool. Now let's add some kind of a chorusing effect. I'm thinking maybe we could do the micro shift from Sound Toys. This is a cool retro sort of chorusing effect. So it's a little bit muddy. I want to bring out some high end in this. So let's pull out this SIQ is a great one for the high end. I'm just going to crank this a little bit. Cool, that sounds nice and balanced. The piano is giving us a nice feel there, meshed with the drums. Let's slide over here and we're going to deal with this pad. This is a really great element that Stefan has added. Let's solo it. So the first thing I want to do with this is I want to see if we've got any low frequencies happening. Pretty clean down there, but we'll put that just in case. Now let's go ahead and let's just crank the high end. Let's try to get some air out of this pad. See, the EQ didn't even show you that was there, but once you crank it, you can get this nice sizzle on the top of that pad. Now the other thing that I want to do with this is make it kind of hug the other instruments and surround them. I want it to be wider. Just bringing that up just a bit. Let's add a chorus. So we'll just use the stock chorus in Logic. We'll pull that up and let's see what we've got here. Ooh, that's nice. That D mode. Really nice. So it really just pulls everything to the outside of the stereo field there, which is cool. Let's make it even more intense here, and let's add the tremolo effect, the same thing we used from our hi-hats over there. We're just going to bounce them around a little bit. So I turn the rate to half note there, the depth down just a bit. Finally, let's add a big reverb. Give this a little more vibe. Ooh, that's nice. That's a very vibey element there. I like that. All right, let's move on to our last element here, which is a pan pipe. Where is that happening? Let's see. Very cool. Let's add a delay to that. I want to add the timeless delay here. Just the time. That sounds cool. So I want to show you a trick. I think that this will work well for this element. A lot of times you would just reach for an EQ to bring a little bit of brightness, because this is sort of sitting in the back of the mix a little bit, and I want it to, I don't want it to be too obtrusive, but I still want it to be easily heard, because it is a cool element. I like the melody and just what he's got there. So let's put a bit crusher on it. Now, some of you are scratching your heads like, where are we going with this? But I'm going to turn the resolution to 16-bit. We're going to keep the drive at 0. And let's turn the down sampling on. And right now, let's just solo this. It immediately gives us a little bit of high end there. It's a little too much. It's more of a distortion right now, but I'm going to turn the mix down. So let me turn that off and let you hear the difference. And with. Let's see if that helps it. I just panned it just a little bit to the left. You'll notice that most of our elements are panned center. However, we are using things like tremolo, like chorusing to give us that spread. So it's not so obvious that we're hard panning things or anything like that for this, but it still has a wide sound. We've got some nice elements here to give us that width. Move over here to our chorus, see what that sounds like. Very cool. All right, so the mix is sounding really nice, really balanced. Let's go ahead and go to ozone, and now we want to get it to competing commercial levels. So we're not necessarily mastering right now, but we do want our beats to be loud enough to compete with commercial records. So let's just go ahead and let's see what happens when we start pulling the threshold down on our maximizer. Bring our 808 up just a touch here. Cool, so we are at our target, which is -9 RMS. It's going to be able to compete commercially. And you notice that we didn't have to rely on this to give us width or to give us the depth. All we did was just use it to give us a nice controlled maximization of the level at the very end. So if we take this off, it's not changing the mix at all. So we're doing all of our processes that are giving us the depth and all of the things that are really drawing you into the sound. We're doing that in the mix. We're not relying on EQing, all that kind of stuff in the mastering. A lot of people are tending to get a little bit too reliant on this mastering stage to, you know, do exciting and EQing and widening and all that stuff. But if you do the mix properly, the mastering process should really only be about final tweaks, especially when you're dealing with vocals on a song or something like that. Obviously, you're going to, adjust a little bit. But again, in the beat mixing process, we just want to rely on this to bring us to our commercial levels. So anyways, y'all, I hope you got something from this mix today. Again, this is a production by Stefan Guy, a friend of mine that is also on YouTube. He's got a great channel with cool content for the Logic Pro users. So I will put a link to his channel up in the top of the screen. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below. If you learned anything in this video, please like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.